We'd like to thank Montecito Bank and Trust for their generous support in making Scam Squad possible. I'm Patty Teal.
And I'm Deputy District Attorney Vicki Johnson. Scam Squad is up next.
Sound off.
1, 2.
Sound off.
3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Scam Squad.
Welcome to Scam Squad. This is going to be a great show. I'm very excited about it. I'm here with Deputy District Attorney Vicki Johnson, as usual, and I want you to introduce our guest today, Vicki.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So, Patty, just by way of introduction, I've often described the romance scam as the most dangerous of all of the scams, and that's because these scammers are great psychologists and they will keep their victims hooked and under their control, or under the ether, as they call it, for a very long time, sometimes years. And at the end, the victim has not only lost all of their money, they've also lost their heart and somebody they thought was the romantic partner or their best friend. So it's traumatic on both a financial and emotional issue. And our guest today, Jessica, is the daughter of a romance scam victim. And she heard one of our podcasts, Patty, on romance scams and realized that her mother had been caught up with this. So she called our fraud hotline. And after she told me her story, I asked her if she would come on the show and share her experience, and she agreed. So Jessica, welcome to Scam Squad. We're so happy to have you with us today.
We really are. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you for having me.
Jessica, why don't you start by telling me something about your mother? How old is she? Does she live with somebody? Does she live alone? Does she use social media? Just a little bit of a picture of her.
Sure. So she's 74. She lives alone. My father died a few years back, so she's lived by herself now for a little while. And she does use social media. I think she started her accounts to follow my dog, but she does use it to keep up with friends and also follow celebrities.
So, Jessica, how did you first find out that your mother was caught up with a scammer?
So it actually happened on Christmas. I will say I felt like there was something going on and I wasn't quite sure what it was, but you know, when you just have a feeling that something is up. And so at Christmas, when she went to the bathroom, I just grabbed her cell phone to take a look at it. And I saw these Google chats with this person and they were calling each other, my husband, my wife. And I had probably 2 minutes to look at it and not freak out and panic. And I said, okay, we're going to just put this aside and we're going to do some digging once she leaves and try to figure out what this means.
This must have come as a huge shock.
Oh, it was a huge shock, completely. So the first thing that we did a little bit of a deep dive on my mother's social media because we found the name of the person. So it was supposedly Vince Gill, the country artist. And so we did a little deep dive on my mother's social media and we saw that she had posted some comments on his Instagram, on his official, actual Instagram. After she left on Christmas, we launched our own internal investigation at home. And I had reached out to one of her friends who she traveled to Nashville with earlier in the year to go to see a concert. And I said, what do you know about this Vince Gill? And she said, I know everything. I know your mother's been talking to him. And I know that she has asked me for money to make an investment with him. And so we knew at that point that this was something pretty substantial.
And so did you confront her with this information? What did you do next?
So what I did next, once her friend had confirmed that she knew about it, I reached out to, we live in Massachusetts, I reached out to the Executive Office of Elder Affairs and filed an abuse report, elder abuse. We were assigned a social worker. And then within a day, the social worker got back to us and he had actually been in touch with my mother for a couple of months prior. And we found out after a little bit of research that my mother's bank told her that she was the victim of a romance scam. And she did not believe them, of course. And they had called elder services and this protective service worker was assigned to her. And so he had been talking to my mother.
And was he able to convince her that this was a scam?
I don't think so. We're 5 months out now. I don't think she still believes it. And we were fortunate enough that He was available to join us when we did the intervention. So we had a few days after Christmas to build the case and learn as much as we could without her. And he came down and met with us at the same time. So he was a very calming presence when I was not the most calm. And he was trying to explain to her that this was not real. And you could just see her whole world was crashing in as he was saying this. And I don't think she believed it.
So she thought she was really communicating with Vince Gill or perhaps his PR person. Is that right?
She thought it was the real Vince Gill. And I think the more research that we did once I took over her accounts, we could see that she was talking to multiple people that were pretending to be Vince Gill. And there were also people pretending to be his daughter. Yes, there's a lot of the imposters.
And so during that meeting with the social worker, you were not able to convince her that this was a scam.
No, our goal of that meeting was to tell her what had happened, explain it to her, and then also to file the police report because in Massachusetts, she would be the one that has to file the police report. I couldn't do it on her behalf. And so once we filed the police report, things really took off at that point.
So what happened next?
So we were assigned a detective, told the whole story to them. They said the money is long gone. You really can't get that back because she had been sending money for almost a year at that point. And so we knew, based on the length of time, we knew that that would have been a substantial amount of money for her to keep them coming back for that long.
Did you ever find out how much money she sent in all?
We know now probably close to 450,000. So the wire transfers, we're able to track those. She sent cashier's checks. She sent cash in the mail. They tried to get her to do Bitcoin, and her response to that was that all of the Bitcoin ATMs are in a bad neighborhood. So she didn't do Bitcoin for that reason.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Was this a substantial part of her retirement as far as you know?
That was pretty much all of her retirement. It was 401k, annuity. She also took out personal loans for that. She did cash advances on credit cards. So it's quite a financial nightmare to try to come out from that.
I can well imagine. What other steps did you take to try and deal with this situation?
So probably about 10 years ago, my parents did their estate plan. And as part of that, they had a power of attorney document drawn up. And so I had that in my in case of emergency folder. So I grabbed that. And of course, this happened right after Christmas. So you try to find somebody in a bank or anything, nobody's around. So we hit the ground running the first week of January, going to all of the banks, trying to see what the status was of everything, get statements from the past year so that we could match up what she was sending. After contacting the banks, I reached out to the lawyer to make sure that we had the most up-to-date documents that we could use for trying to get access to her accounts that were remaining, which that was definitely a challenge because power of attorney does not work in all cases, as I found out.
Yeah,
but it is a helpful place to get started.
Yeah. Were the banks cooperative? Did the banks, it sounds like the bank, one of the banks was the entity that reported this to Adult Protective, what we call Adult Protective Services. So they understood what was going on. Is that right?
Yep, they could see what was happening. My mother was going there pretty regularly to make these wire transfers. And I think she had gone to a couple of different branches, but she had gone to the one by her house the most, and they were the ones that noticed and called on it. But the problem was once they confronted her and they closed her account down, she had a second bank somewhere that she was using too. So she continued to do wire transfers through the other bank, and then of course sending money in cashier's checks.
How frustrating. That must have just been awful.
It makes no sense to me. And I think that's the one thing I'll say going through this is that none of this makes sense. And that's something that you have to live with. We have the chat history with the scammer and the conversation in the beginning. It started talking a little bit about personal life, but mostly it transitioned pretty quickly to, when are you going to the bank? Are you going to the bank today? And the story that they told as to why they needed money. And it was just, they created a sob story, and they're master manipulators in trying to get you to believe and feel bad and do whatever you can for them.
So I'm understanding that this started out when she went to Vince Gill's actual site. or social media platform. Is that correct?
Right. It was on Instagram.
And then it sounds like the scammers took over and they quickly got her offline to a different location. Is that what happened?
Right. They immediately want to get you off of the platform because those accounts get reported pretty quickly. So I remember this was around the time that the financial transactions started happening. My mother, she doesn't know what she's doing online. She sent me a link in Instagram to the Viber app, which I had no idea what it was. And it turns out now I know that that was the app that they were trying to get her to go onto. And she couldn't figure out how to download it. They tried to get her to do WhatsApp. She couldn't figure out that. And so they ended up doing Google Chat.
And she was able to do that.
She did Google Chat, and we still have most of the history of the conversations now.
What kinds of things were they saying to her, in particular, trying to lure her into wanting to give money?
So my mother's side of the conversation was very much a conversation that you would have with a friend. Like, I'm going to work. Here's what I had for dinner. It's raining. It's snowing. It's just basic, normal conversation. The conversation with the scammer, I think my mother provided a lot of information to this person about where she knew Vince Gill was going, because my mother was following his tour and she knew, oh, are you going to be in, Tampa on this day? And you must be headed here next. So my mother provided a lot of content. They really didn't have to do much research at all. But they said that their story was that he was getting divorced from his wife, who's Amy Grant. And Amy Grant was divorcing him because he had been convicted of raping a girl in a hotel room, and that he was trying to pay her off to keep quiet. And so that was the story that was told to my mother, that she then proceeded to start getting money and sending it to him to pay this girl off.
So she didn't believe in the rape story. She thought that the wife was sort of just using that to try and get money from her husband. Is that right?
Her response to the rape was that, you're a good man and I know you wouldn't do that.
Okay. And she thought she was communicating directly with Vince Gill, or were there times where she was also communicating with people pretending to be a relative or his PR person? How did that work?
So it was basically between Vince Gill and then he had a lawyer. All of the scammers seem to have a lawyer they like to reference. People seem to trust them. And so I've seen messages from my mother to the lawyer talking about Vince and trying to get the money for him and figuring all of this out.
Were you able to take any steps to protect her money?
So at the point that we found out, a lot of it was gone. I identified where there was still money remaining, and I reached out to that company right away, explained what happened, sent in the power of attorney document. Some of these things, they want the original power of attorney, which if you want to mail that and you lose your copy, that's a little risky. But I explained it to them and they were all horrified at what had happened. And we were able to put a lock on it so that she couldn't withdraw it, even though it was in her name. Everything else, I would say, there wasn't really much left of anything. And actually, the morning of the intervention with her, she had another 20-something thousand dollars arriving from a retirement account in her checking account. And she was planning to go and send that as a wire that day.
Were you able to stop that?
We did. Yeah. We went first thing in the morning. So she wasn't expecting anything.
So does she still believe at this point in time that she has a relationship with Vince Gill?
She does. That's what I've heard from friends that have confided in me, that are close with her, that she still thinks that this is real. She's not a planner. She doesn't, this kind of financial strain is very tough when you're 74 years old. And I think they'll not fully understanding and grasping what this means for her. I understand it, but she does not understand it.
It's the whole family is hurt by these kind of scams, because it must have been very difficult for you to be trying so hard to convince your mom and her not believing you. I just can't even imagine how difficult that has been for you. And of course, it's difficult for your mom, but it's a family issue, isn't it?
It is, and I'm her only living relative, so it's just the two of us. And now, what is the plan? Where is she going to go now from here?
Does she own her own house?
She does.
Are you worried that she might try and take out a loan against that house in order to continue financing this scam?
Yes. So interestingly enough, I've contacted the bank that has the mortgage on the house. I told them what happened, and they were actually the hardest people to work with through all of this. They basically said they can't give me any information. Thankfully, it's a small bank, and I spoke to many people over there. I said, please let everyone know about this. So if she comes in to apply for a home equity line of credit, you know, I guess thankfully, as a result of all of this, she has terrible credit, so she shouldn't be able to get approved for anything.
I'm sorry to laugh, but it can be a blessing, yes?
It it is, and
Hmm.
I will say I also froze her credit at all three bureaus once this happened. She has no business applying for any type of credit now, so I feel comfortable with that. And also not knowing what information she gave to the scammer, we can't really take any chances, so we've frozen everything.
Are you still involved with this in terms of trying to take care of your mom and take care of her finances? Is there still things that you have to pay attention to and be aware of on a daily or weekly basis?
It's a daily ongoing thing. It takes up a couple of hours, I would say, at least of every day. It's not only the working with the police to see what updates they have, which there's very few, but also from the legal side of it and financially, what is that going to mean for her future, and what is housing going to look like in the future? Things that I didn't think I would have to think about at this point in time, but she's not worried about it. So of course someone has to figure out what that means. And hopefully, if there are other guardrails that we can put in place just to prevent any further loss at this point, which I don't think there's much, um, to try to get that done.
Right. Wow. So this has been traumatic for you and your family as well as for your mom.
It's stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people in terms of watching out for red flags or what people should be careful about?
Sure. So I would say I would start before anything ever happens, always just having an open communication with your family members, parents, grandparents, anyone really that will listen to try to talk about these things that are online. Celebrities are not looking to talk to us regular people. Taylor Swift is not reaching out. Like it's not happening. But just having an open communication about that, but also I think for families, in my case, I'm my mother's only living relative, and once my father died, I suggested put my name on all of the accounts so that I know where things are if something happens. And I think there's a reluctance to do that because it's admitting I'm getting older,
Mhm.
something might happen, and so for me, it was important to say I'm not trying to take anything. I have all of my own things. I'm not looking for anything from you, but this is what we need to do to make sure that if something does happen, that there's access that we can get right away.
Yeah, yeah, that's good advice because seniors, of course, don't want to give up control, and they're fearful that family members will come in and try and get control of their finances, and that's not a comfortable position for them to be in. But at least if you can be added on as a contact person, just so that you can have the information uh, and know what to watch out for. And you're so correct. We know that education is the best and sometimes really the only defense against these kinds of scams. Have you gotten any information from any of the law enforcement agencies about where these scammers might be coming from? They're probably not coming from within our country.
Right. So the big, I guess, kingpin of the scam is in Nigeria. So they've confirmed that through a few different means. But there is one person, another elderly woman in the United States who's been a mule, and she was one of the people that my mother was sending money to.
So they were able to track down one of the people that your mom was sending money to, one of the money mules. And was she
Right.
kind of an innocent victim too? Was she somebody who maybe had run out of money, so now they were using her to transmit money?
Exactly. I think that's what happens, that the person originally is the one giving them the money, and then once they've run out, they then make them into the mule and say, if you receive money, then you can keep a cut of it and then send me the rest. And based on the information we got from the police, it sounds like that's exactly what was happening.
So are you concerned with this happening with your mom?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think they brainwash their victims, and you lose all sense of reality and what's right and wrong. And so I don't think that's off the table for her. She's very secretive, and that's one of the things that they start out with in the very beginning. I love my privacy, and I don't want people to know what I'm doing. And so other people in her life had some knowledge of him, but she never said anything to me.
So did she talk to her friends about, oh, I'm in a relationship with Vince Gill, or he and I text back and forth? Was that something that she talked to her friends about?
Yeah, so her friend that she traveled with, she had to tell her because they were going to be going to his show and she was supposed to meet up with him. And so her friend knew about it that way. And then she proceeded to ask her for money as an investment. Um, and at that point, I think it's because my mother had run out of money.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you said this had been going on a year before you caught on to what was happening, because that's very important information, because you have to understand, and I'm sure you do at this point, that these scammers, particularly with romance scams, are incredibly good psychologists, and they know how to suck a person in. So they get them what they call under the ether. So the victims are thinking not with their rational brain, they're thinking with their emotions. And of course, this scammer, this set of scammers, had a whole year to brainwash your mother and get her under, quote, the ether. So when a social worker comes along, or a police officer comes along, or a family member and says, hey, this is a scam, they don't believe you, because the scammer has had this incredibly long period of time to build trust, and probably to say to the victim, people might tell you that this isn't real, but it is real. You and I know it's real, and so on and so forth. And so when somebody comes along, they're not going to dissuade the person in a 10-minute conversation or a 10-hour conversation. That person is hooked. And that's the unfortunate part of this particular scam. Um, I've talked to people who are experts, if you can be, in dealing with romance scam victims. And they all say the same thing, which is, you, as hard as this is to do, you have to approach the victims with sympathy and without judgment. And you have to just ask questions like, gee, this person seems to have an awful lot of financial problems. For one person, he has the most hardships of anybody I've ever met. Or how is this person using the money? Do they really need it more than you do? Just answer questions. And have you ever met this person in person or face to face in a phone call? Just start them maybe questioning the entire process. Is this really real? But it's very, very difficult. And finally, just saying to the person, hey, I know this is a difficult relationship to give up, because they're offering you attention and love, and everything that you're feeling is perfectly normal. Who wants to give that up? Especially in the later years of our life, and your father is no longer around to provide that to your mother. So it's a very difficult situation, but I really want to commend you for everything that you have done since the moment you found out what was going on. You took quick and decisive action. You did everything that you possibly could have done. And it seems that to the best of your ability, you have safeguarded your mother from this point on, but you still have to stay vigilant and keep on red alert.
Yeah, you're a
So
wonderful daughter, that's for sure.
you
We would
really are.
only hope that your daughter would fight for you the way you've been fighting for your mother. So, and thank you for sharing your story. Vicki, they have those counseling for those who have been scammed, but I'm not sure if Jessica's mother would be ready for it yet. But if at some point she does realize that they do have counseling sessions from AARP for people who have been scammed by the romance scam.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, Jessica, is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we sign off?
I would just encourage people to be proactive with their family members and talking about these things, but also in future estate planning, having that power of attorney document has been very helpful. And I think as people age, it's something important that it should be part of your toolkit, and it helps the families move forward and try to help.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on our show and sharing this valuable information and your story. And by doing so, I'm hoping we can help others avoid this same terrible situation. So thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.